18 months ago, Spain crashed out of the 2022 World Cup in the round of 16 against Morocco. Despite dominating possession, Spain failed to score in more than 120 minutes of football against the North Africans, who were competing in their first knockout game at a World Cup since 1986, before missing all three of their penalties in the shootout. It was the second successive World Cup in which Spain were eliminated on penalties in the round of 16, having fallen to the same fate at the same stage against Russia in 2018, and at the 2014 World Cup, which Spain went into as joint favourites, they failed to even get out of the groups, losing 5-1 against the Netherlands and 2-0 against Chile. It was a far cry from Spain's dominance between 2008 and 2012, when they won 3 successive major tournaments, rarely losing possession, let alone football matches, and cementing their status as one of the greatest national teams of all time. A little over 12 months ago, newly appointed head coach Luis de la Fuente's job appeared to be at serious risk. His predecessor, Luis Enrique, was supposed to be a long-term appointment by the Royal Spanish Football Federation, but following Spain's early exit in Qatar, he was dismissed. With Unai Emery, Mikel Arteta and Pep Guardiola, the Spanish public's 3 favourites for the job, all in work and unavailable, the RFEF promoted De La Fuente from the under-21s to the senior team. Largely unknown among the general public, De La Fuente had only managed 11 games of senior professional football over the preceding 20 years, all 11 of them coming with Alaves in the third tier of Spanish football. Viewed as a continuity candidate following more than a decade of failure, and not the radical shift that the national team desperately required, a 2-0 defeat against Scotland in only his second game in charge, having refused popular demand, particularly within the media, for Sergio Ramos to be recalled, further piled on the pressure. Victory in the UEFA Nations League finals, which Spain had qualified for under Enrique, probably saved De La Fuente his job. But heading into Euro 2024, Spain were outsiders. The 4th or 5th favourites, trailing England, France and Germany, and typically neck and neck with Portugal, Euro 2024 was viewed as a transitional tournament for Spain. De La Fuente himself described his own team as being, quote, a team for the future who are always learning. The future, as it turned out though, would be the immediate future. Spain were the deserved winners at Euro 2024, with the most goals, the highest XG, despite having no penalties, the most progressive carries, the most progressive passes, and ending the tournament with 6 of their players making UEFA's Euro 2024 team of the tournament, including Lamine Yamal, who only turned 17 days before the final. It is a stunning renaissance and a staggering achievement on the part of De La Fuente over a remarkably short period of time, made all the more unlikely due to the fact that it has happened amidst a backdrop of chaos and scandal within the RFEF, numerous crises in La Liga, and financial disarray at Barcelona, which was once Spain's largest supplier of players. So just how did they, and specifically Luis de la Fuente, manage to pull it off? Well, that's what today's video is all about. So sit back, relax, and join me on a journey to Spain as we take a look at the national team's revival, the little known and, quite frankly, just little bald man who has masterminded it, and ultimately, how Spain managed to win Euro 2024. Declan Rice said that he didn't know who the Spanish head coach was before seeing his name flash up on the TV during Euro 2024, and he wasn't alone. Luis de la Fuente inherited a challenging set of circumstances when he accepted the Spain job. Unwanted by most Spanish football fans, but very highly regarded by the president of the RFEF, Luis Rubiales, Fuente had been part of the RFEF coaching staff for the last 9 years, 5 with the under-19s, 4 with the under-21s, and the 2020 Olympic Games with the under-23s. Even Rubiales didn't dare push for Fuente to get a contract beyond Euro 2024 with the senior team, such was the skepticism surrounding his appointment in Spain as a whole. Synonymous with Spain's youth team setup, even during his playing days, Fuente represented Spain's under-18s, under-21s and Olympic team, but never received a senior cap or call-up. Born in the town of Aro in northern Spain, which is famous for its wine production festival, Fuente came through the youth ranks with Athletic Club. He went on to spend 8 years, over 2 separate stints, in the Athletic Club first team during a golden age for Athletic, where he won 2 La Liga titles and the Copa del Rey. A dogged, determined, and ever-dependable left-back, Fuente also played for Sevilla and Alaves, following each of his 2 stints with Athletic Club. Following retirement, like so many players in Bilbao, Sociedad, and the surrounding region, De La Fuente moved into coaching. The Basque Country has a unique record of churning out world-class managers within the modern era, from Andoni Iraola and Unai Emery to Mikel Arteta and Xabi Alonso, for reasons that I find fascinating, and soon plan to explore by visiting the region for a video that I will upload to my second channel. De La Fuente is much older than any of those managers, but his rise to prominence has come considerably later in life. Fuente's first job in management came with Portugalete, an amateur team competing in the Basque regional leagues, which sit at step 5 of the Spanish Football League pyramid. Following 3 years there, Fuente joined Herrera de Vitoria in the 3rd tier, but he was sacked after less than a year in the job. At that point, De La Fuente moved into youth team coaching, firstly with his former club Sevilla, followed by Athletic Club. Between 2006 and 2011, he twice managed Bilbao Athletic Club's reserve team, who were a bottom-half 3rd-tier team at the time. In 2011, Fuente returned to senior management with Alaves, who were also in the 3rd tier at the time, but after just 11 games in charge, having won 4, drawn 4 and lost 3 of them, he was prematurely dismissed. It would be the best part of 2 years before Fuente returned to management, with Spain's under-19s, beginning a long-term love affair with the national youth team setup, which seemed better suited to his skill set than managing in the senior game. Very personable and hands-on, Fuente tried to work closely with every one of his players, while maintaining a sense of authority and strict non-negotiables. The same is true of his management of the senior team. Much like Gareth Southgate with England, who was also the national under-21 coach before taking over the senior team, Fuente's first task was to change the mood surrounding the national team, both externally, among the media and supporters, but especially internally, among the players and staff themselves. The Spain squad, even at the height of their success between 2008 and 2012, has rarely been entirely unified or controversy-free. A lot of those tensions stemmed from club disputes between the 2 El Clasico giants, Real Madrid and Barcelona, which carried over into international camps, as well as political differences, most notably emanating from those players who feel a proud sense of Catalan or Basque identity, and may be sympathetic or supportive of nationalist or separatist movements. Catalan native Oleguer, who made 175 appearances for Barcelona, famously refused to represent Spain, stating, quote, "I wouldn't commit to a national team that doesn't represent me in any way." Oleguer, who was more politically active than most footballers, was rare in outright refusing to represent Spain, but symbolic of broader tensions nonetheless. Gerard Piqué, despite playing an integral part in Spain's 2010 World Cup and Euro 2012 conquests, was booed by Spanish fans at an open training session in 2017 after voicing his support for Catalan independence. Piqué's comments came in light of the 2017 Catalan independence referendum, which was declared unconstitutional by the Spanish government, but made international headlines after the police brutalized many of those who were attempting to cast their votes. In relation to the Spanish national team, Piqué stated, quote, "The person who goes with the national team isn't the most patriotic, you have to go and perform to your maximum. It's not a competition of patriotism, it's about going and giving your all to win. That's how I understand it." End quote. That is a comment from one of Spain's most capped and most decorated players of all time. There aren't many countries where such an iconic figure from the national team would express such open ambivalence and disconnect with the country they are representing. Throughout Spain's 2008 to 2012 era, it was the friendship between Carlos Puyol and Iker Casillas, Barcelona and Real Madrid's respective captains, which just about kept a lid on things. That, combined with the sheer talent and winning mentality of Spain's players, carried over from their club success, aided by the fact that over half of their starting 11 was just the sensationally successful Barcelona team of that era, paved the way for success. But as Casillas, Puyol, Xavi, Iniesta, and latterly Ramos and Busquets exited the international scene, Spain could no longer win by the power of sheer talent alone. They lacked the big characters who had previously united their dressing room, and those underlying tensions and divisions became more apparent. De La Fuente had what now seems like an easy solution, but at the time, as an unpopular appointment with a very fragile mandate, was actually a very controversial one. He resisted intense calls, particularly within the powerful Madrid-based media, to recall Sergio Ramos to the national team, and after Dani Ceballos brought up club grievances with Barcelona midfielder Gavi following a recent El Clasico on international duty, Fuente kicked him out of the squad, never to return. Fuente was a big fan of Ceballos, even selecting him as one of his 3 overage players when he managed Spain at the Olympics in Japan, so his banishment sent out a clear message that no one was bigger than the national team, De La Fuente, and his non-negotiables. It is easy to overcomplicate management and coaching, and we are about to come on to the tactical nuances and shifts that Fuente has implemented, but the cornerstone of his project has been to make playing for Spain fun and enjoyable, and that is reflected in the way that Spain played at Euro 2024 as the most expressive and entertaining team at the tournament. To that end, Fuente appointed Alvaro Morata as the national team's new captain. A strange choice to outsiders, Morata is someone who has frequently been maligned for his mentality, or lack thereof, having struggled to turn his obvious talent into big moments on the biggest stages. That criticism has created a powerful resilience though, and Morata has never lost his sense of fun. The most popular character within the Spain dressing room, Morata is friends with everyone, he is looked up to by the younger member of Spain's squad, which there are lots of, and he is fully committed to his role as captain. Whereas other players are unmoved by receiving the captaincy armband these days, Morata has embraced it and everything that it involves. He acts as a conduit between the players and Fuente, relaying their thoughts and concerns that they may not be willing to voice to him directly, quickly neutralising any disputes by force of his personality, and knowing when the dressing room requires an injection of seriousness or an injection of humour. Before the Euros, as was reported by Paul Balous in The Athletic, Morata asked every member of the Spain squad to submit a song towards a tournament playlist so that all tastes would be represented. It is a small act, but it's representative of Morata's proactive approach to captaincy and why he has proven to be such a popular appointment. Fuente, likewise, is incredibly attentive. One of his first acts as head coach of the senior team was to make Spain's staff feel more involved. He messages every one of them personally following every international break to thank them for their involvement. When it came to negotiating bonuses for the Euros with the RFEF, Alvaro Morata took it upon himself as captain to make sure that the team's staff would be properly remunerated and rewarded for their role. The end result is a sense of unity, squad cohesion, and team spirit that wasn't even there during Spain's most successful period between 2008 and 2012, when they had a far more talented squad. To that end, Fuente has made the likes of Ayoze Perez and Joselu, arguably not 2 of Spain's 26 most talented players, regular fixtures in his squad, since he knows that they are strong, experienced characters who have embraced their roles as backup players and won't cause him any headaches. All of this seems very sensible and common sense now, but before the Euros, these were brave decisions. Similarly, Fuente put any debates about who should be Spain's number 1 to bed pretty swiftly, hanging his hat on his former club Athletic Club's Unai Simon. He blocked out a lot of noise surrounding the likes of Ramos and Nacho to make Robin Lenormand and Aymeric Laporte, both of whom were born and raised in France, the centre-back partnership upon which his team would be built. He made Marc Cucurella his first-choice left-back, ahead of Alex Grimaldo, a bold decision given the respective seasons they have just had at Chelsea and Bayer Leverkusen, and he has placed enormous trust into very young wingers, Nico Williams and Lamine Yamal, who were ultimately Spain's star men at the Euros. Fuente has made it clear that he is ambivalent about status or reputation. He will only pick the players who he feels will best fit the squad in terms of both profile and personality, many of whom he knows intimately, having worked closely with them in the past. Fuente may have been little known among Spain fans, and virtually totally unknown by international football fans, but over half of the Spain squad at Euro 2024 have played under him before, many of them with significant success. Rodri, Unai Simon and Mikel Merino all won the Under-19 Euros with Fuente in 2015. Fabian Ruiz, Dani Olmo and Mikel Oyarzabal won the Under-21 Euros playing under him in 2019. And Marc Cucurella, Martin Zubamendi and Pedri, among others, were all part of the Spain squad that won silver at the Olympics in 2021, where Spain reached the final and only lost during extra time against Brazil. Winning international trophies under Fuente, therefore, feels second nature to a lot of these players, and just 6 months into the job, they won another trophy under him. The UEFA Nations League might not be the most prestigious trophy in the international game just yet, but Spain still had to overcome Italy and Croatia in the finals, who would, incidentally, form 2 out of their 3 Euro 2024 group stage opponents, and their victory bred a further confidence in the Fuente project and their own talents. Spain went into Euro 2024 as relative underdogs, but that was a status that they relished. Going under the radar suited Spain's young players down to the ground, and even after being widely tipped to win the final against England, based upon the two teams' performances up to that point, Fuente was keen to portray Spain as being dark horses in an effort to retain that underdog spirit. It's not just the mentality or vibes that Fuente has shifted though, it's also the way in which Spain play. When we think of Spain, because of their generational team of 2008 to 2012, we tend to think of diminutive and technically gifted midfield players, dominating possession, moving the ball quickly within tight spaces, and picking their moment when their opponents have switched off. In other words, tiki-taka. It was a style of play which made Spain the best team on the planet, but as football shifted, becoming more physical, athletic, and at times direct, and Spain's best players in that system aged and retired, it felt as though Spain had been left in the dust, trying to relive their former glories with inferior players in a world that had left them behind. Spain still have gifted midfield technicians, although they're not that diminutive anymore. Fabian Ruiz and Rodri are 6'2" and 6'3", and even Pedri is 5'9", and they still tended to dominate possession at Euro 2024, but the similarities just about end there. Whereas Spain's wingers in those days, the likes of Andres Iniesta and David Silva, like to drift inside, receive the ball to feet, and link up play in tight spaces, De La Fuente plays two proper wingers, so to speak, in Nico Williams and Lamine Yamal, both of whom tend to stay wide, stretching the pitch, take on and beat their fullbacks in 1v1s, and put loads of crosses into the box. The width of Williams and Yamal actually benefited Spain's midfield, initially Rodri, Ruiz and Pedri, and later Rodri, Ruiz and Olmo, by stretching the pitch and giving them more time and space to operate in. The added directness, in terms of getting balls in the box, not only benefited Williams and Yamal themselves, in terms of their skill, speed, and willingness to get in the box themselves, but also Spain's two centre-forwards, Morata and Joselu, who, unlike some Spain forwards of old, whether that be David Villa, Fernando Torres, or famously, at Euro 2012, Cesc Fabregas, thrive off balls into the box and aerial duels. Alvaro Morata, Spain's talisman, only actually scored 1 goal at the Euros, but as with Stefan Guvarch and Olivier Giroud with the great French teams of the 1998 and 2018 World Cups, that didn't really matter. He provided a focal point and a presence which allowed Williams and Yamal to flourish and created the space for Dani Olmo, the tournament's joint top scorer, to pick up knockdowns and run into. It's no surprise that both of Spain's goals against England in the final came directly from crosses, turned in by Nico Williams and Mikel Oyarzabal. Meanwhile, England's goal actually came from patient, well-worked build-up, a delicate layoff, and a tidy finish. In some ways, Spain scored 2 goals that we might previously have associated more with England, and England scored 1 goal which we might once have associated with Spain. Though tiki-taka is viewed as being synonymous with Spanish football, in reality, it would probably be more accurate to say that it is synonymous with Barcelona. It's just that the great Spanish team between 2008 and 2012 was dominated by a Barcelona team that was so wildly successful that it made sense to emulate and indeed copy them on the international stage. Spanish football as a whole has historically been one of the world's great melting pots. La Liga has been blessed with some of the game's greatest coaches, from the total football of Cruyff and Michels to the pragmatism of Herrera and Mourinho, and everything in between, with the likes of Capello, Ancelotti, Trapattoni, Del Bosque, Guardiola, Robson, Simeone, and Van Gaal. Historically, Spanish football has borrowed something from all of them. It is in that tradition that De La Fuente has moved away from simply passing Spain's opponents to death and towards a much more varied and multi-pronged approach, one which ultimately best suited the talent at his disposal. What made Spain unique at Euro 2024, at least among the leading nations, when one compares them with the likes of England, France, Portugal and, albeit to a lesser extent Germany, was their willingness to take risks. Terrible, as some have come to call it, has become the prevailing fashion at international tournaments, but in a sea of risk-free miasma, Spain threw some caution to the wind. In the game against France, perhaps most notably of all, Spain left 38-year-old Jesus Navas, who was deputising at right back ahead of the suspended Dani Carvajal, routinely isolated up against Kylian Mbappe, arguably the best and certainly among the quickest wide forwards in the world, in order to create overloads on the left flank, where they got a lot of joy up against Jules Koundé and Ousmane Dembele. You don't need me to tell you the risks involved in that strategy, and there were a couple of occasions in which it very nearly cost Spain, but ultimately, it was a risk which saw them maintain a constant threat and win the game. Spain also made excellent use, if you can call it that, of tactical fouls. Spain committed 94 fouls at Euro 2024. Germany committed the next most, with 68, the Netherlands were third with 66, and Spain's final opponents England were down in 7th with 55. Despite playing the exact same number of games then, Spain committed over 70% more fouls than England, in addition to picking up the second most yellow cards, 16, and being one of only 5 teams to see red. So Spain took risks, but when it went wrong and they became exposed, they were either extremely cynical or extremely smart, I suppose, depending upon your view of tactical fouls. That's not to say that Spain were incredibly offensive or gung-ho, it's just that, by comparison to England, France or Portugal, they look like the 1970 Brazil team. In actual fact, Spain tended to take the leading games through their calculated risk-taking and then become more conservative. Their entire front three, Williams, Yamal and Morata, were all withdrawn at 1-0 up versus Germany. Meanwhile, all three, plus Dani Olmo, effectively Spain's front four, were brought off at 2-1 up against France, with Mikel Merino replacing Dani Olmo as Spain looked to see out the game. And against England, Morata was replaced by Oyarzabal at 1-0, followed by Merino for Yamal at 2-1. In other words, what we have we hold. This was a team that was aware of its own deficiencies and vulnerabilities, and never thought that they could blow teams like Germany, France, or England out of the water. As Rodri put it, Spain played like a big team with the ball, and like a small team without it. The risks that Spain took could very easily have backfired had their tactical fouls been punished more harshly by referees, forcing players to change the way in which they played on yellows and, potentially, like Dani Carvajal, even see red, or if their opponent's star players, like Harry Kane with England or most notably Kylian Mbappe with France, been fully fit and firing. But at a tournament where that wasn't the case, and there were no other outstanding teams, Spain's calculated risks paid off. It also helped that the one major injury that Spain picked up during the tournament, to Pedri, at the start of their game against Germany, actually seemed to help their team dynamic and fluidity, with Dani Olmo breaking back into De La Fuente's 11 and providing when it mattered most. It's fine margins in international football, with all but a few teams throughout history, Spain being one of them 12 to 15 years ago, requiring some degree of luck or good fortune along the way. Although it felt like Spain had crumbled spectacularly between their three-peat of 2008-12 and getting grouped at the 2014 World Cup, followed by successive round of 16 exits against relative minnows, the reality is that Spain have the most coaches, per capita, of any major football nation, outstanding youth development and both professional and amateur academies, and they have kept winning at youth team level as a result. This team may have won ahead of schedule at Euro 2024, but only a fool would have written Spain off long term. By the same token, it would be a mistake to glorify Spanish football too much. In some ways, Spain's success at Euro 2024, and indeed the 2023 Women's World Cup, is reminiscent of Italy's success at the 2006 World Cup, in that it has taken place in the shadow of a major scandal, and was partially unexpected for that reason. The reason that Luis de la Fuente is the manager of the Spanish senior team is because of Luis Rubiales, the former president of the RFEF, who is currently banned for 3 years and awaiting trial for sexual assault after he kissed Jenny Hermoso in Spain's Women's World Cup celebrations without her consent. One of the uncomfortable truths of both Spain's Women's World Cup and Euro 2024 wins is that 15 of the Spanish women's team's most talented players weren't at the 2023 Women's World Cup because they were boycotting due to their treatment at the hands of the Rubiales-led RFEF, and one of the things which bonded De La Fuente and his players in the Spanish men's team was a collective silence and lack of solidarity, and therefore plenty of condemnation, for refusing to support the women's players and take a stand against Rubiales, at least until it became convenient for them. De La Fuente, in fact, infamously stood up and applauded the speech that Luis Rubiales delivered in which he refused to resign despite the backlash, framing himself as a victim of, and I quote, a social assassination in the name of false feminism. It wasn't long before it became clear that Rubiales' position was untenable, and, miraculously, De La Fuente had a sudden change of heart, discovering a moral compass all of a sudden, and issuing a grovelling apology in which he called his actions unjustifiable, blamed his behaviour on psychological stress, and said that he lacked the bravery to contact Jenny Hermoso. On an unrelated note, De La Fuente revealed that he found it difficult to sleep at night during the Euros, routinely getting as little as 3 hours of sleep. Yeah, I'm not surprised. It's not just sexism and sexual assault that has blighted the RFEF, nor is it just Rubiales. In addition to his suspension from football and criminal investigation, Rubiales was also arrested in April as part of a corruption investigation into the relocation of the Spanish Super Cup to Saudi Arabia. His successor, Pedro Roca, who is an ally of Rubiales and was Rubiales' own preferred candidate to replace him, was also suspended for 2 years by a senior Spanish court owing to a very serious infringement of his authority on July 16th, literally 2 days after watching Spain lift the European Championship trophy in Berlin. The RFEF also isn't the only problem facing Spanish football. Real Madrid, despite their unprecedented dominance of the Champions League, remain determined to see the creation of a Super League, spearheaded by their president Florentino Perez. Barcelona are now a good few years into a serious financial crisis. Meanwhile, La Liga's strict spending rules mean that the rest of the division, with the occasional exception of Atletico Madrid, are unable to compete with their continental peers, most notably in the Premier League. In some ways, however, this has always been the case. Spanish football continues to dance while the walls of the RFEF fall in, senior administrators are investigated and arrested, and clubs' finances crumble. It could even be argued, in the case of clubs lacking the resources to keep hold of their players and compete with the Premier League, particularly mid-table clubs, but even in the case of Barcelona now, it actually helps to afford young players greater opportunities. If you look at the likes of Gavi, Pedri, Alejandro Balde, Fermin Lopez, and Lamine Yamal at Barca alone. On the pitch, meanwhile, Spain's success so far ahead of schedule can only bode well. The average age of the Spain squad at Euro 2024 was boosted to 27 because of the presence of Dani Carvajal, Nacho, Jesus Navas, and Joselu, aged 32, 34, 38, and 34. all of whom were most likely playing at their final tournaments, but Nico Williams, Fermin Lopez and Pedri are 21, Lamine Yamal only just turned 17, and the likes of Pau Cubarsí, Gavi and Alejandro Balde are all under the age of 21. Spain may only have been the 5th favourites heading into Euro 2024, but there'll be no underdog status or quiet confidence for them at the 2026 World Cup, with Spain now installed as 11-2 favourites to win the tournament in the United States. That is it for today's video, but thank you all very much as ever for watching. Hit the like button if you enjoyed it. I sincerely hope that was the case. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comments, and of course, it goes without saying, doesn't it? Make sure that you are subscribed and have notifications turned on, not just for this channel, HITC Sevens, but also my second channel that I mentioned earlier on, Alfie Potsama, both of which should be about to appear on your screens now, along with a couple of videos that you might fancy watching after this one. You can also find me on Twitter, Instagram or Threads via the username @HITC Sevens on all three, should you wish to do so, and all of those links plus a whole lot more good stuff should be down in the video description below. Cheers.